Welcome back to the California Conversation. I'm Tess Abraham. Over the past few weeks, it feels like California has just been falling apart. From everything from protests about immigration, which turned into riots and the calling in of the National Guard, and then a showdown between Governor Gavin Newsom and President Donald Trump, it just can feel like there is too much going on and it is not worth trying to engage with, so we should just throw up our hands and disengage entirely. But we are not going to do that. We are going to stay informed and we are going to form thoughtful responses to everything going on around us. Because when everything feels chaotic, it is more important than ever to get down to the truth. So that is what we are going to do today. But before we get started, make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you stay up to date on all things California politics. And if you want more information about the sources used in compiling this episode, then you should check out the corresponding article on my website, which is linked below. Okay, so we have immigration riots, we have massive protests, we have federal government involvement, and we have a showdown between our governor and the president. What do all of these things have in common? What is the connecting thread? To step back and look at the bigger picture, I believe the chaos that has unfolded in California is the perfect example of people wanting their voices to be heard, but doing so without truth, without clarity, and without self-control. And when that happens, we don't get real change in our state, we just get chaos. So let's cover exactly what's been happening over the past few weeks and how this all connects, starting with the ICE protests. On June 6th, ICE agents carried out a series of different immigration raids in different parts of downtown Los Angeles. They arrested over 100 illegal immigrants, and this sparked a massive protest of around over 1,000 protesters rallying outside of downtown buildings where the immigrants were taken to be detained. They posed as calling for an end to immigration enforcement and they wanted ICE out of LA. But despite what Mayor Karen Bass was saying, these were not mostly peaceful protests. It didn't take long for these protests to turn into full-on riots. I mean, the protesters flooded the 101 freeway. They were setting cars on fire. They were setting Waymos, those self-driving cars that are popular in big cities now. They were setting those on fire. They were burning the American flag while waving the Mexican flag. And they were throwing bottles and bricks and anything else that they could get their hands on at law enforcement. The pictures and videos all over social media at the time were insane. It literally looked like Los Angeles was burning down. I mean, there's also mass looting, there's graffiti everywhere. It was almost apocalyptic. When you think about it, this is such an insane response to ICE carrying out raids across Los Angeles, especially when the Trump administration has made it clear that a policy priority of the administration is to arrest and deport people who are in our country illegally. I mean, there were accusations just being thrown around everywhere about Trump targeting certain minority communities, about ICE coming in and just terrorizing local communities, about spreading fear that people were just going to be deported at random. And really, we need to take the time to realize that this is what happens when people respond in emotion or they react based on a narrative rather than reacting based on being grounded in truth and the reality of what's actually going on. When we react based on feelings and based on misinformation or based on media narratives, that's when things turn violent, things turn angry, and things really get out of control. And that's exactly what we saw happen in Los Angeles just a few weeks ago. For example, if you believe that ICE is targeting certain minority communities just based on skin color or based on their background, that's blatantly not true. The Trump administration, again, has made it clear that its priority is to deport anyone who is here illegally. And more than that, ICE is focusing specifically on criminals, so people with a criminal record or criminal behaviors in the United States. This is not race-based discrimination. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. If you are here legally in the United States, if you're a legal citizen, if you're a legal permanent resident, even if you're a legal temporary resident here on a visa, then you have the paperwork, you have the documentation to be able to show that you are allowed to be here. But if you are not here legally and you cannot prove that, then that is when you are actually in danger of being deported. But again, ICE has clearly prioritized criminals. So now it's even a step further than just anyone or the average resident on the street being afraid of ICE picking them up. ICE is specifically going after those with criminal records. And I want you to just listen to a few of the people who were arrested in the Los Angeles area the day that these riots broke out. Quang Phan was a 49-year-old illegal immigrant from Vietnam, and he was convicted of second-degree murder. Rolando Enriquez was a 55-year-old illegal immigrant from the Philippines, convicted of burglary, rape, and intent to commit rape, and he was given a 37-year prison sentence. Lionel Laguna, he was a 55-year-old illegal immigrant from Mexico convicted of domestic battery, child cruelty, driving under the influence, and assault with a deadly weapon. Armando Ordaz was a 44-year-old illegal immigrant from Mexico convicted of sexual battery, stolen property, and petty theft. Jose Ortiz was a 42-year-old illegal immigrant convicted of drug trafficking. And Jordan Escobar, a 32-year-old illegal immigrant, was convicted of distribution of heroin and cocaine and domestic violence. And the list just goes on and on and on with name after name of immigrants who are in our country illegally and who have committed heinous crimes. Are these the people who you want to live in your country, in your state, and in your communities? Do you want to defend and protect the rights of people who are here illegally, who are also murderers, rapists, domestic abusers, drug traffickers? Are these the people who you believe are just hardworking immigrants who came here to seek a better life and to pursue the American dream? Absolutely not. To believe that is complete and utterly foolish. These are people who are here illegally, so they have no right to be here. But on top of that, who have committed these terrible crimes in our country, and they should be deported. But this is what happens when you throw all reason and logic and moral clarity out of the window, and you just believe the narrative that Trump is really mean or that he's racist and he just wants to target certain groups of people based on their skin color. That's not true, but that is what propels you to start to defend these criminals who arguably should not be in your country or in your communities. I mean, just to look at this video of a protester literally standing in front of one of these ICE vehicles and screaming, "Let my people go."
Let my people go! Let my people go! Let my people
Bring your dog! These are parents! These are community members!
So here's my question to the person in that video. Are these your people? Are these the people that you identify with? The people who have committed murder and rape and abused children? And more than that, what is the solution? What are we advocating for through these protests? That ICE just lets people go at random, even though they have committed crimes? That is not a serious policy position that should be considered by our government. So we see that these protesters are not interacting with the actual legal basis for the Trump administration's policies, and they're not interacting with sound arguments. This is just what happens when you let go of all self-control and you let emotion run your actions. One other accusation that we saw among these protesters that I want to speak to for a minute is the idea that ICE is terrorizing local communities. They're just trying to stoke fear in the population. That also is just blatantly untrue. ICE is trying to carry out their job. Their job is federal immigration enforcement. And so they have the right, they have the authorization to detain and deport anyone who has come into our country illegally. That's what they're trying to carry out. So if you feel fear or if you feel terror, that is because you know that you have broken the law in order to be here and they have legal standing to be able to arrest you. This is like saying that law enforcement stokes fear or terrorizes thieves because they go after people who have committed burglary or theft. That's insane. You wouldn't blame the police for being the ones who are making criminals afraid. You would say that you are only afraid if you've committed criminal acts. But if you don't commit those criminal acts, then you have nothing to fear. You can go about your normal business. It's the same with this. ICE is just enforcing the law. So if you've broken the law, then yeah, you have some grounds to maybe be afraid that you'll be deported, but you did that willingly. So that was the immigration protests that we saw. Protesters just lost all self-control. They didn't stop to consider the actual policies that they were rallying against, nor did they propose any solutions for the Trump administration that would actually benefit our state or our country. And it resulted in mass damage all across Los Angeles. This is totally opposite from We Heart Nutrition, who are providing research-backed, high-quality supplements that are actually posing solution to your health and your needs. We Heart Nutrition is a family-owned company that seeks to create great products for people who want to take care of their health and to live well. While other brands cut corners with fillers or synthetic additives, We Heart Nutrition focuses on what really works. Sustainably sourced, naturally derived ingredients formulated by nutritionists right here in the United States. But what really sets them apart is their commitment to giving back. They're not just here to sell supplements, they're also here to support life in any way possible. And so, because of that, 10% of their sales go directly towards supporting pro life pregnancy centers all across America. So, if you're looking for a supplement company that is committed to quality and integrity and that shares your values, you should use my discount code TESSABRAHAM at checkout to get 20% off your order. They have all the essentials for both men and women, so you should go check them out today. Use my code TESSABRAHAM or shop through the link below to get 20% off your order to support a great company that will also support moms and babies in need and to support the show. But getting back to the California chaos, local and state governments were not doing anything to really address this rioting. I mean, Mayor Karen Bass flat out denied the fact that the riots were even happening. She said that the city was mostly peaceful, and then she went on to actually blame ICE for a lot of the protests that were happening.
If immigration raids had not happened here, we would not have the disorder that went on last night. I will tell you that it is peaceful now, but we do not know where and when the next raids will be. That is completely unnecessary. Nothing was happening here. Los Angeles was peaceful before Friday.
Now, just to address that for a second, you can't blame law enforcement for the reaction of criminals. So when someone breaks the law, if they are mad that they are being held accountable for it, that's not law enforcement's fault for enforcing the law. That is the person's fault for breaking the law and then for believing that they wouldn't be held accountable for their actions. This is just like if you have a child and they say that they want ice cream for breakfast and you say, no, you can't have that. That is ridiculous. That would be really bad for your health. And they start throwing a massive tantrum. Now imagine other parents walk in the room and they see that your child is throwing a tantrum and they start blaming you for it. They say, why didn't you just give them the ice cream? Now you've made them very upset. This is your fault. You would think that was insane. You would say, this is not my fault. I am doing what's best for my child and they are just throwing a fit. I'm not responsible for their actions or their response. The same is true here. ICE did not create the rioting. ICE didn't create the destruction. And so for Karen Bass and even Gavin Newsom to be blaming law enforcement for these riots is ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. People have the choice to either respond logically and rationally, even to respond peacefully, even if they disagree, or they have the choice to go out and riot and loot and start fires and burn the American flag. And unfortunately, protesters chose the latter choice instead of the former. That is not the fault of ICE, and that's not the fault of the Trump administration. But I'm getting off track. The point is that the mayor of Los Angeles and the governor of our state both pretty much did nothing to address the rioting, and they denied that it was even happening. So President Trump stepped in and he ordered the National Guard. He ordered 2,000 troops to come down to LA, and they were not ordered to arrest anybody. They really weren't here to deal with a lot of the rioting. They were here to protect law enforcement. So a lot of law enforcement and immigration officers were being harmed in these riots. A lot of them were injured. And so he ordered the National Guard to step in and to protect law enforcement, as well as to ensure that federal officials like ICE could still carry out the enforcement of federal law. President Trump did this by invoking Title 10 of the federal code. And this authorizes the president to call in the National Guard to a state when there's an invasion, rebellion, or if there's infringement on the execution of federal laws in the state, which is exactly what we had happening here. Because of the fact that federal immigration enforcement officers were being harmed, that qualified as a quote-unquote rebellion. And then on top of that, it was incredibly difficult for ICE agents to be able to carry out their job. And so the protesters were also infringing on the execution of federal law. Now, of course, Gavin Newsom did not like this. When does he ever like anything that President Trump does? So he once again sued the federal government. He sued the Trump administration over this decision. And it's really funny because initially his lawsuit, he won, but then it was taken to an appeals court and it was immediately overturned within like a day. And the courts ruled in favor of President Trump. So his lawsuit really didn't do anything, but he sued the federal government over this. And he said that the National Guard was really sent in just to create chaos. I don't know how that works when their whole job is to help quell the chaos, but he said that they came in to manufacture chaos and violence. But here's my question. What's the alternative? They don't like that President Trump called in the National Guard. But when you look at the pictures of the mass destruction across Los Angeles, when you look at the fires and the smoke, it's terrifying scenes. What else are we supposed to do? They were content to just go on the news and say that nothing was happening, that it's mostly peaceful. But people who were here could see with their own eyes that it wasn't. And so were we supposed to just let Los Angeles burn? Now, back in 2020, I think we all remember the devastation that came in light of the Black Lives Matter riots. Those spiraled into full-blown destruction in a similar pattern as what was happening in Los Angeles. And I just want to take Minneapolis, Minnesota as a case study example. Because Governor Tim Walz, when the riots first broke out in his state at the time, he delayed action. So he didn't call in the National Guard as quickly as President Trump called in the National Guard in Los Angeles. Within 72 hours, the city was basically on fire. Entire blocks of the city were looted and destroyed. There were over $500 million in damages done, and an entire police precinct was given over to the rioters. The National Guard was deployed eventually, but by then it was so out of control that it was too late and it essentially didn't do any good. So we fast forward to today and we see that there was a similar spark in Los Angeles. There was a similar reaction and potential for what happened in Minneapolis, but LA didn't become Minneapolis. And the question is, why? Well, it seems like the reason is because there was immediate action taken at the outset of the riots to show that President Trump was not going to play around with the destruction and the violence. And that's the thing that our leaders really have to understand, is that when chaos begins to spiral, you either are going to restore order or you're going to lose control. There's really no in between. You have to step up or you are just giving over to whatever the rioters want to do. So in Minneapolis, we see that the leadership really failed. They didn't want to seem harsh. They didn't want to seem over-militarized. They didn't want to look too aggressive. But the result of that is that civilians and normal people suffered. Businesses were completely destroyed. They lost everything. Law enforcement was terrorized for their lives. Criminals were not the ones who suffered harm from this. It was just normal, ordinary people. In LA, we were on the same track because, again, Mayor Bass said that these protests were just relatively minor. But the federal government saw what was happening and they decided to step in before it was too late. And as a result, the violence was quelled. So to everyone saying that President Trump's response was too harsh, my question would be, would it have been better to just let LA burn and just let the riots to continue? Sometimes saving a city starts with doing something that is unpopular. And thankfully, President Trump was willing to do that when our governor and LA's mayor were not. Now, the emotional side of the argument would just say that Trump is mean and that he wants to militarize the world. But we can see that that was not true. When you look at the facts and you contend with the arguments, you see that this was the best option for trying to save California and save one of the largest cities in California. So going back to the thread that connects all of these stories and what we should learn from what happened over the past few weeks in LA, this really shows us what happens when a desire to speak isn't matched with the discipline to actually think. This drives home the point that you need to be committed to being informed and not being manipulated by the media narrative or just by what is popular and what people are saying around you. When you hear arguments about something like immigration or about these ICE raids, it's really important to stop and to think rationally, not to get sucked into what the main narratives are floating around, but instead to actually ask, what would the alternatives to these things be? What is the point of these actions that are being carried out by either a state or a federal government? What are they trying to protect us from? What laws were being broken? I mean, these are all valuable questions that we need to be asking and answering. But unfortunately, many people are not stopping to actually think and consider those questions. They're just going based on emotion and based on initial reaction. Because here's the thing, the only way to change California is to actually change public opinion. And the only way to change public opinion is to force people to think rationally. So all of that to say, Now is not the time to give up or to disengage. Now is the time to roll up our sleeves and to have the hard conversations. We have the power to change the communities around us. Your impact might feel small, but by changing one community at a time and by doing the hard work of helping people to think critically through these issues and to work through their emotions while also providing them with facts and logic and reason, that is how we start to change the narrative across our state. Push back on the popular talking points about Trump and immigration. Don't give in even an inch on what you know to be true. And little by little, work to change the communities around you with clarity, conviction, and moral courage. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope it was helpful for you as you navigate life in our state and that you even learned something new. Please spread the word and share this show with your friends, family, and fellow Californians. You can follow me on social media at It's Tess Abraham, and I'll see you back here next week for another episode of The California Conversation.